Thank you. I had a little bit of trepidation about coming to England, which is sort of known for its chilly social relations in some ways. That was countered a little bit by my knowledge, and my knowledge of Islam is very superficial, but my knowledge that Islam is known worldwide for its hospitality and its graciousness. My wife and I sat on the tarmac in Georgia for 2 hours before our plane even took off, and we are old and creaky, at least I am, and I didn't sleep. We arrived at the airport basically having missed a night's sleep and frustrated and angry with an airline. And we were greeted with 5 or 6 young men with candy and with beautiful flowers for my wife. Warmly and graciously, we were taken by Hamza, not Hamza, but a different Hamza, he was here a moment ago, to our hotel and treated in every moment with respect and gracious hospitality, which I would have expected from Islam. But you know, England, not so sure. If the hospitality alone were enough to convey and win the argument, I would have to give up. But unfortunately, or fortunately from my point of view, that does not settle the issue. I do greet you as brothers and sisters. I am not necessarily speaking for all atheists now, but I am speaking for myself. I can consider all of my fellow human beings to be brothers and sisters, and friends or potential friends, interesting people. Hamza, the lion, Tzortzis, I'll never get his last name right, but believe me when I tell you, I respect him, and if I call him Mr. Tzortzis or Hamza, I am speaking with respect. He's obviously the better looking. He's the more polished speaker. He's much better known, at least in the UK. He has all of these things going for him, but it is very much an unfair fight because history and logic are on my side. So he will lose the debate for those of you who are open-minded and are interested in the truth, and that is not a fair thing for such a sophisticated, intelligent, effective speaker. I also ask that you do forgive me for my ignorance regarding Islam. I have no intention to say anything offensive. The fact that I do not agree with you may in fact be offensive to some people, and that I cannot help because I do not agree with you. I don't actually expect to persuade you. I know the title is You Decide. My best guess is nobody's going to decide anything different from what they started out with tonight. Whether you're Islamic or atheist, you're likely to continue to be. I think I'm about as likely to persuade Hamza Tzortzis as he is to persuade me, which is to say, not very. But I do think there are things to learn, and I am very interested in learning about Islam and about Islamic thought. But my purpose in this original talk is to explain to you as much as I can in 20 or 30 minutes why I'm an atheist. And there are a number of reasons, and some of them are more philosophical and some are less. I agree with some of what my opponent said. I do believe we have an hang up on that word, epistemic duty to investigate, to find out, to learn, to test truth. W.K. Clifford wrote a telling essay on this, in my opinion, about a ship owner who is not allowed simply to say, oh, the ship is in good shape, send it on out into the ocean. He must actually investigate and find out whether it is in good shape before he risks the lives and the cargo and so forth. People like Tom Flynn and Keith Parsons brought that particular essay to my attention, and I think it's very telling. We must have systematic tests for truths, and those tests must be independent of the conclusion that we think maybe we're going to wind up with. It was mentioned in the introduction of me that my wife and I published a book by Oliver Halley who's a good friend. And Oliver is the one who told me that when you're thinking about religious views, you must, as Hamza suggested, you must test for truth. It's not good enough just to take something that's appealing or interesting. You must test it for truth. If you accept with investigation and with care a religious viewpoint that is based on a more recent prophet, that is based on a holy book that came from that prophet and a revelation from God, then maybe you will understand why I reject Islam. But if you will accept the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith and the 5 golden tablets and all of that sort of thing without investigation, then maybe you will not be able to understand my argument. It is very important that we human beings, if I tell you my favorite ice cream flavor is chocolate, you can accept that without any investigation. It doesn't have any consequence. If I tell you that I am Superman and I am here to check your gas meter at 9 o'clock at night while you're watching football, that's that sport where you kick things through the uprights and pass the ball? No? Maybe not. Okay, soccer to us Americans. Then you should exercise your epistemic duty and call the gas company. And in cases of religion, you must do that, and I think if you do, you will, in fact, become an atheist or remain an atheist. I'm going to talk about 7 different points. Epistemic duty, the fact that there is, in fact, no good reason not to be an atheist, and therefore one should be one. The fact that there is no coherent, objective concept of God or Allah available to us at all. The fact that religion usually, not always, but usually makes things worse for human beings, at least in the long run, not better. The fact that there is evil and suffering, and that the kind of evil and suffering we find in this world, and I know Hamza has written about this subject. I see you looking at him. Yes, I know he's written about it. The kind of evil and suffering that we find in this world is incompatible not just with a Christian concept of God, but with Allah, with any concept of an intelligent and creative designer of this universe. 6th, the fact that demography predicts religious belief much better than theology. Throughout the world, you will find geography and culture predicting what somebody's religious beliefs are much better than their understanding of particular religious beliefs. And that goes for atheists as well as it goes for Islamic believers. And 7th, that there is no objective morality available to us human beings. No morality that comes from outside of humankind. And we'll talk about all of those things. If I don't get to all of them, then I'll cheat and do it in the rebuttal. You expect atheists to cheat, right? I've talked about the epistemic duty. Can't talk about it much because I keep mispronouncing the word. But let's go to the 2nd point. In short, and I think I would be within my philosophical rights, although it wouldn't be very smart debating technique, simply to say there's no case been made and sit down. Because I don't think any case has been made tonight or in the thousands of books that have been written to defend theism and ideas of God. There is no evidence, there is no logic, there is no basis for believing in a supernatural being that holds up under careful scrutiny and under examination. I am an atheist, and you should be one as well because of our epistemic duty, because of the things that Hamza talked about earlier. The default should be non-belief. If you don't have a good enough reason to believe, then you should be an atheist, and all of you should be. Let's talk about the fact that there is no coherent, much less objective concept of what we even mean when we say God or Allah. I know that Muslims say Allah has many names, and they explain this as evidence that there's all sorts of contradictory and different faces of God and so forth. But when you examine it carefully, it doesn't hold up. These things that are contradictory are still contradictory, and the fact that you have different names for a just or a punisher or an angry Allah as well as for a compassionate one does not resolve the impossibility of a coherent and objective God. And we know that my opponent has written about this, we know that there is no objective concept of God because there is nothing that's come from outside of humankind, and humankind has vastly different opinions and conclusions about what one or more gods look like, act like, etc. We'll come back to that some, but the concept is sufficiently incoherent that it is not worth devoting your life to or destroying others. Religion, and by that term, this particular point, I'm trying to be very broad. I, in fact, am even including some things where there is no belief in a God, Marxism in some cases and so forth. A belief system that you think cannot be questioned, that you think has to be right, including all of the world's major religions. These belief systems do more harm than good in the long run. They impede the development of knowledge. They don't end or destroy science, but they interfere with the progress that's available from science. They oppose it most often. In the case of wars, of course, are fought for many different reasons. Even the most obviously religious entangled wars are fought for reasons other than just religion. They're fought over land and over power struggles and all these sorts of things. But without a doubt, the wars that we human beings have fought with each other are worsened by people believing that they, whichever side in a particular struggle they're on, are fighting on God's side, and that God has commanded them to go forward and kill the enemy. Religion makes it easier to dehumanize your enemy. And when I say religion, I'm speaking more broadly here, as I say. It can be a concept, an idea that can't be questioned other than a belief in God. But Christianity, Judaism, Islam all have demonstrated over history that in fact they do make wars worse and education more difficult and the rights and available power of individuals lessened and the rights of women reduced by all of these religions. When we engage in war, it turns out that always, without exception, those people who are fighting on God's behalf and doing what God has told them to are in practice doing what some human being has told them God has said to do. It is a dangerous and difficult thing in this universe and in this life that supernatural beliefs get in the way of rational behavior. So that human being who claims to be speaking for God needs to be doubted and needs to be, and generally will be determined, not generally always, will be determined upon careful inspection only to be speaking for an idea, for power, for himself, etc. Great evil results from believing that if a message is coming from God and therefore we cannot question it. Depending on human leaders who claim to be proceeding from ultimate authority demonstrably interferes with advances in human understanding, individuals' or society's understanding, and it curtails or even opposes scientific advances in understanding. The problem of evil, of suffering, it is incompatible. It does not work. You can't really make sense of the universe as a created, well-designed, intelligently produced universe and reconcile that with a vast amount of suffering. And I'm not just talking about the suffering of a sinner who does not follow the rules. I am talking about a 4-year-old girl in Piedmont, Alabama, who was in a church service with her mother, who was a Methodist preacher, and a tornado struck the church service on Palm Sunday during the church service, killed 20 people, including that 4-year-old girl. Now, could it be that Allah was trying to punish those folks for worshiping in a Methodist church or for having a female pastor? I can't accept that. That doesn't make sense to me. Could it be that this 4-year-old girl committed some terrible sin and deserved to die, or that her mother did something terrible and deserved to have her daughter die in front of her? I can't believe that any of you would accept that. I certainly cannot accept it. And of course, that's a very small and isolated example. We have a few years ago a horrible tsunami that killed 250,000 people, including more women and children probably than men. Many, many innocent children, even unborn children, were killed in that tsunami. And another example much more recently this year in Haiti, where a couple of 100,000 people were killed and many, many others injured and their lives ruined by an earthquake. Now, it is possible, I suppose, to believe in a God that would create that kind of disastrous, murderous, irrational pain. But it doesn't really make sense if you claim that the God you believe in, Allah or God, is a rational or an intelligent or a compassionate or a good, even in a limited sense, good God. That doesn't make sense. And you should apply philosophical testing of that to see if it makes sense. And it does not. It's not just suffering that occurs because somebody's not following a moral standard. It is suffering that is overwhelmingly arbitrary, capricious, pointless. Now, if in fact a theist, Islamic or any other sort of theist, says to me, these are God's ways, they are not our ways. We're here in England where the poet, it's spelled Cowper, but it's actually pronounced Cooper, said he works in mysterious ways his wonders to perform. He hides his smiling face. I find every theist I've ever talked to, and there may be an exception tonight, argues there are many things we don't understand about what God did. And that's the explanation of suffering. It's beyond our ability to understand it. You have admitted that you cannot defend this concept of God if you think you cannot understand what you say he did in a particular case or allowed to happen in a particular case. Whether that's a tornado in Alabama or a tsunami in Asia or an earthquake in Haiti. It is true that if Hamza Tzortzis convinced me that Allah actually did do those things, that then I would question whether that God is worth worshiping or not. But that's not the point I'm making. I'm not saying, I had a Catholic priest in a debate with me earlier this year say, oh, well, the fact that Ed is asking these questions proves that he actually believes in God. He's trying to sort out what God's like and why he's so mean and stuff like that. And that's not true. It's the fact that this sort of a universe is incompatible with the idea of a God that leads me not to believe in God. I'm not mad at God. I don't think he's sadistic. I don't think he exists. There's a big difference. I mentioned demography, not theology. And I happen to be reading, or actually my wife was reading, I'll have to quit plagiarizing and admit. She was reading a New Yorker fictional story today. And she read out loud to me from this story by somebody named Jonathan Foer, F-O-E-R. Isn't it funny that if God were to reveal and explain himself, the majority of the world would necessarily be disappointed? Now that means no matter what the God said or explained, the majority of the world does not agree on what God is like or what he wants or what he has commanded us to do. Actually, even the majority of Muslims don't agree on that, despite what my friend may have said earlier. But certainly Muslims and Baptists and Mormons and Buddhists and others don't agree. Demography, the geography and culture combination that gives us statistics of how old people are and what their income is and where they live and that sort of thing, is a far better predictor of what people will believe than theology. A very small percentage of the world's people believe what they believe because they have examined and carefully discovered what the truth is. And that goes for atheists as well as it goes for Muslims and Christians and all the rest. Why is that important? It makes no sense if there actually is a God, and if this God has infinite power to communicate and to command. It makes no sense there would be this vast disagreement among the world's people, and that the prediction of what people do believe would be, what did their parents believe? What did their grandparents believe? There are people who convert. I used to be a Christian, now I'm an atheist. Hamza Tzortzis used to be, I don't know what he used to be, but he wasn't a Muslim. Christian, I don't know what your previous, it doesn't matter. I'll get back to talking to him later. People do convert, and people do examine religious claims and religious beliefs intelligently, but that is very much the exception. And I congratulate all of you that you are here tonight, that you are in fact listening to more than one side about this, and I hope you are thinking about it. You shouldn't change your mind. The debate topic title says you decide. You shouldn't decide based on one debate. You need to do a lot of reading and thinking, but you need to read and think from the ones you disagree with, not just the ones you agree with. If you are Islamic, you should read Richard Dawkins, and you should read Christopher Hitchens, and you should read Sam Harris. You should read these people with as open a mind as you can. If you are, and I hope there are a few, freethinkers and atheists in the crowd, you should read the works of Hamza Tzortzis. You should read a variety of different religious views and test them systematically before you come to conclusions about this thing. It is not to be taken lightly, and on that I think we seriously agree. Finally, I say there is no objective morality. And this is something that theists usually vigorously disagree with me on, whether it's Christians or Islamic or whoever. They insist there is some absolute standard of behavior, and that was given to us in revealed scripture, in the Quran, in the Holy Bible, in the Torah, in the Book of Mormon, etc. But we do not have any consistency in moral standards. Hamza Tzortzis has written that we all object to the Holocaust. Well, I certainly object to the Holocaust, and I agree with him about that. The wanton and pointless killing of Jews and gypsies and atheists and homosexuals is obviously not an acceptable thing. And how do I know that it's not an acceptable thing if I don't believe in God? Because I do believe in human beings, and I do believe in individual human rights, and I do believe we have to construct the best moral standards we can, but they will never be an objective that is coming from outside of humanity, an unchanging set of standards. And we know that human beings of all religions and all cultures have changed their moral standards. I'm not talking about their behavior and whether they meet the moral standards, but changed the standards over time and from one place to another. There are, despite claims to the contrary, serious inconsistencies within the Islamic world as to what is an acceptable moral standard on a particular case. You agree on many important things, but you don't all agree on all moral standards. And there are differences, vast differences, between Christians and Islamic followers, between Jews and Christians, and so forth. And there are vast differences within Christianity. And these are on important questions, not on trivial things. There are differences in conclusion about what counts as murder, about when abortion is acceptable, about whether capital punishment is desirable or acceptable, and on and what the role of war should be.
Big things and little things get strong disagreement among human cultures, and that is not consistent with the idea of an intelligent and all-knowing and all-powerful creator of the universe. We do not have objective morality. It isn't even possible to reach it.
We should certainly care about how we treat each other. I'm not saying morality is not important. I'm saying that we cannot have the kind of morality that you would expect to have if, in fact, we had an Allah or a all-powerful being who was in charge of this and who could communicate with us. We'll talk some more about the Quran, although I don't know very much about it, I'll tell you quite honestly. But whatever it is, we know there is not consistent communication from a God to all of humanity, because not even a majority of humanity agree on what the moral standards should be. And it's not just A versus B, there are thousands of possibilities and different ways of looking at this. To sum up, we have a duty to test for truth. There is no good reason to believe in any God. None of the gods on offer are coherent or objective. Religion makes human life worse overall. The appalling, pointless suffering, and by the way, I should have added not just human suffering. I mean, that cute little rabbit that gets eaten alive by the cougar is suffering. And none of us think, even those of you who are religious, that that rabbit has a chance to go to heaven. The problems with the answers to, the problem of evil is a very well-known problem. It is, any response to it is called a theodicy, an explanation of why God would allow or create such things. And there are hundreds of them, but they all fail, including my opponents. The fact that demography determines belief and that there is no objective God-given morality are the final reasons. Thank you.